Hi, welcome back to the another session of Java programming. In this session, we are going to discuss about exception handling. What is an exception? Exception is an abnormal condition that may arise in a code during the execution. It's nothing but a runtime error. ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಕೋಡ್ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಕಂಪೈಲ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನೋ ಲಾಜಿಕಲ್ ಎರರ್ಸ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಔಟ್ಪುಟ್ ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗ್ಬಹುದು. ಬಟ್ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಸಿಂಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಎರರ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ಕಂಪೈಲ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಸಿಂಟ್ಯಾಕ್ಸ್ ಎರರ್ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಲಾಜಿಕಲ್ ಎರರ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ನಾವು ಇನ್ಪುಟ್ ಕೊಡುವಾಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಇನ್ಪುಟ್ ಮೇಲೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ರಾಂಗ್ ಔಟ್ಪುಟ್, ಅಬ್ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್, ಸಮಥಿಂಗ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಡಿವೈಡ್ ಬೈ 0 ಆ ಥರ ಎರರ್ಸ್ ಅಕ್ಕರ್ ಆದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನ ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. ಸೊ ದಟ್ ಇಸ್ ವಿ ಕಾಲ್ ದಮ್ ಎಸ್ ಅಬ್ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ಸ್ ದಟ್ ಮೇ ಅರೈಸ್ ಡ್ಯೂರಿಂಗ್ ದಿ ಎಕ್ಸಿಕ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಅ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್. So Java is a pure object-oriented language. So each and everything is represented as an object. Here we are going to represent even Java exception as an object only. So this is an exceptional condition. So whenever an exception occurs in a Java code, an exception object is created and it is thrown out of the method. So what the programmer should do? We should write a code to handle this exception, and that is we have to catch this exception and we have to process this exception. This is what we are going to do with our exception handling. So exception means abnormal condition that may arise in a code during the execution. So when we see the exception hierarchy, throwable is the superclass of this exception, and under this superclass throwable we have two subclasses. One is exception, the second one is error. And error is an error generated by the system which is not in our control, whereas exception we have a set of exception. Runtime exception is one of the exceptions under this exception. So runtime exception is an subclass of this exception. We have a set of predefined exceptions that also we will see in the next sessions. The Java exceptions can be generated by the runtime system or manually by the piece of code. These exceptions can be handled in Java by using 5 classes or keywords. We call them as try, catch, throw, throws, and finally. By using these 5 classes or keywords, we can handle the exceptions in Java. Let us discuss try and catch in this session. Try block. So we don't call it as try block, catch block. Yes, block means it is a set of code inside the curly braces. So try block means it is a set of code inside this try block. So try block contains the piece of code where the exception may arise, or the code which should be monitored for exceptions should be given inside this try block. If an exception is generated, then it is immediately thrown out of that particular try block. So once it is thrown, the catch block should be ready to handle those exceptions. So the job of this catch block is to catch the related exception and process those exceptions. Maybe it may display some error message, or it can take some action to handle those exceptions. So this is the syntax of try and catch. So first the try followed by the block of code which should be monitored for errors, and a try block can be followed by one or more catch block. So note down the syntax of catch block. Catch, within parentheses you have to give the exception object. If we don't process those exceptions, ನಾವು ಏನು ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ? Why we want to handle those exceptions? Let us see. This is a small piece of code where I'm going to say that int d is equal to 0 and int a is equal to 42 divided by d. What is the value of d? 0. Anything divided by 0 is infinity. It means your computer cannot calculate. In this situation, what will happen if I execute this particular code? You can check the output here. When I execute, I'll be getting an error message saying that exception in thread main java.lang.arithmetic exception divide by 0 at execute of 0 line number 3. It means it created an exception in the thread main and your program is stopped there. And now let us try to catch this exception using our try and catch block. So this try block should contain the piece of code where the exception may arise, and it is followed by the catch block to handle that particular exception. Now, if we execute this piece of code, you'll be getting an error message which is displayed by the user or the programmer, that is system.out.println exception E. Exception java.lang arithmetic exception divide by 0. Now the exception is handled by the programmer. When we write a program, a single try block may contain a statements where more than one exception may arise. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಕೋಡ್ ಇಂದ ನಿಮಗೆ 3-4 ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಜನರೇಟ್ ಆಗಕ್ಕೆ ಚಾನ್ಸಸ್ ಇದೆ. ಆವಾಗ ನಾವೇನ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ನಾವು ಒಂದಲ್ಲ more than one catch block na use ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. That is what we call it as multiple catches. So in this multiple catch block, whenever an exception occurs, the control will go to the first catch block. If it is not matching, then it will go to the second catch block and so on. If none of the catch block matches, the system will generate its own error message. This is also similar to our if loop. That is, one condition match adre adu second else statement check madalla alva. Ade tara first catch match adre adu second third iro catch block na match madade illa. So normal agi naven ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಜೆನೆರಿಕ್ ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಷನ್ ಕೊಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸೂಪರ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಷನ್, ಅದನ್ನ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾಚ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೊಟ್ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಯಾವುದು ಎಕ್ಸೆಪ್ಷನ್ ನ ಕ್ಯಾಚ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಗೋ ಟು ದಿ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಯಾಚ್ ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ to display the general exception. So that always we have to remember that exception subclasses must come before any other superclass. Let us consider this particular example. To demonstrate multiple catch statement, we have a single try block and there is a chance for two types of exceptions. We are using command line arguments. What do you mean by command line arguments? Command line arguments means arguments passed to the main method through the command line during the execution. So now I am getting the number of command line arguments. A is equal to args dot length, and if A is equal to 0, then 42 divided by 0 will generate an divide by 0 exception, and if this A is not equal to 0, then the control will come to the next statement. C is equal to 1. That is, array C is initialized to 1. So what is the size of the array? Only 1. Now, if I try to access C of 42 is equal to 99, it will generate the other exception, that is array index out of bounds, because we are trying to access the array beyond the limit. So now it should be followed by two catch blocks. The first catch block to process arithmetic exception and the second catch block to handle array index out of bounds exception. Whatever it may be, whether the exception occurs or not, the last statement, that is after try and catch block, will be always executed. Let us check the output. So I have given the input Java multiple catches. There is no argument. There is no argument. So if there is no argument, the number of argument will be taken as 0. So it will generate divide by 0. Check here, after try and catch block is always executed. Now in the second case, we have three inputs, 1, 2, 3. So this we call it as command line arguments. So we have taken three command line arguments, means A is equal to 3. So it will not go to divide by 0 exception. The control will come to the next exception, that is array index out of bounds exception, and it is displaying the value as 42. Now also you can notice after try and catch is always executed. How this try and catch will execute? Whenever an exception arises, the control is immediately transferred out of the try block to the catch block. It will try to match the exception with the catch block one after the other. If any one of the catch block matches, so in this case it matches with the first catch block, then immediately the remaining catch blocks are skipped and the control will come to the last system.out.println. This is how the try and catch will be working during the execution. We have seen a code can have more than one catch block. The same way you can also nest your try statements. So try blocks can be nested. What do you mean by nesting? Yes, nested loops means one loop inside the other. The same way nested try statements means one try block inside the other try block. Consider this particular example. We have two try blocks here. So this is try 1 and this is try 2. So we have nested try block. So this is outer try and this is inner try block. So here the point to be noted is whenever an inner try generates an exception, that particular exception can be caught by both inner catch and the outer catch. But let us consider this example. We are going to see a is equal to args.length and we are trying to find b is equal to 42 divided by a. If a is equal to 0, then it may generate an error. So here we are going to check if a is equal to 1, then a is equal to a divided by a minus 1. 1 minus 1 is once again 0. Here also it is going to generate an error, that is divide by 0. That is then a is equal to 0 or a is equal to 1. We are going to generate an exception, that is divide by 0 exception, 0 error. Here when a is equal to 2, then we say c is equal to 1. That is array c is equal to 1. That is going to generate array index out of bounds exception. So now inside the inner try statement, we have a chance for two exceptions. One is divide by 0, that is arithmetic exception. The other one is array index out of bounds exception. So when you execute this particular coding, then n is equal to 0. When no arguments is passed, it is going to display divide by 0. That is, the outer try is matched with outer catch block. The second condition, when the number of arguments is 1, that is a is equal to 1, we say that we are going to say a is equal to 1 means a is equal to a divided by a minus a. It means we are also going to get divide by 0 exception. It will try to match with the inner catch, that is our array index out of bounds. It is not matching. So automatically the control will come to the outer catch statement and it will display that particular error message, that is divide by 0. That is inner try block can access outer catch. The next case, when you have two arguments, a is equal to 2 and it will generate array index out of bounds exception. When a is equal to 3, that is if I pass more than 2 arguments, then there is no error, the execution will complete. So now we came to know that when we use nested try blocks, the outer try can access only outer catch statement, whereas the inner try can access both inner catch and the outer catch. Please refer these books for further reading. Have a nice day.